today is Q&A night. Did anybody think about bringing any Q's or A's to Q&A night?
What were we talking about that night?
Well, I do have a question,
Okay.
and it's a question about, I know that we just got through with, okay, she brought up a point a while ago, and I'm trying to figure out, I forgot where, when it is celebrated. How do you say it, Purim?
Purim? It's in the
When
spring,
is-
isn't it?
Is it in the
Or
spring?
is it-
It's spring.
Okay, I was just wondering, because I couldn't remember when we did it last year.
Mhm.
And I like to write these things down and remember them so that,
We're trying to make more of an effort to make it more festive. And I think we've gone in that direction quite nicely so far. We've did a lot more for Yom Teruah. We did a pretty good job for Sukkot. So we keep going in that direction.
I know he told me he wanted to make the holidays more festive. When we do and we did this year, we did more for Sukkot, and he just, me
Y'all
and him
sing Sunday?
me and him been talking, huh?
Did y'all sing Sunday?
No, we did have music. We did have some music. And yeah, as we go along, we'll bring more together, I think. But, you know, from me to you is, yeah, I keep a pretty set schedule as to what I teach, because I try to build a foundation and then build on that foundation throughout the year. But as we, I guess technically as we start a new year, are there any particular subjects or
Yes,
things that you would like to delve into a little bit more? You know, we're trying to make our way through the Torah on Tuesdays, and I know Bruce had expressed wanting to get more into Brit Hadashah as
In the sense of especially subjective, that subject or traditional teaching out there, what foundations, like I brought up the judgments,
yeah.
right? How much of that, or is any of that reality or not? Is that,
So basically the source, right? Is that what you're trying to, I mean, you know, how much of it is doctrine and how much of it is
yeah, take a look at it. What is,
in the sense? Is that
they
what-
really say?
That
Well,
sounds good.
somebody in the Saturday class had asked for a couple of lessons more on the history, a more in-depth history. I mean, we've touched on histories of things, but more in-depth histories on the teachings of the church fathers and where they originated from, and how they ended up, you know, in the mainstream, well, in the mainstream belief system today, and you know, as well as
In Christianity?
in Christianity, and where some of the mainstream beliefs came from Judaism, and that was something. And you know, it's one of those things. Are you sure you want to know?
Yeah.
But what are there any other topics that you all would like to cover more in depth? You know, I feel we ought to continue with our Torah study, because the Torah is what gives us a foundation to understand everything else. But in the interim,
I don't believe, has anybody postulated we not do that?
no,
Okay.
no, nobody has
No,
said that. I'm just
absolutely.
saying
No,
that we
he's
need to
just saying if there's
continue,
something else
but
that y'all would like to touch on.
adding in to touch on other stuff as well. So,
I would like the prophets, the other portion of the
Writing.
scriptures, writings to be kind of
Okay.
added in.
all right.
As we, and the times that, and you've gotten where you do a lot of that, start bringing in Judges and Isaiah and things like that, so.
I'm like
just
you.
a little more.
I would like to
of
touch
that.
on that, a little more of that too.
Yeah.
Isaiah and
The thing about teaching, you know, I mean, we've done a couple of the Psalms, but the thing about the prophets is that it's hard to just teach through a book of the prophets
Yeah.
without understanding what he's referring to, or where it comes from that he's talking about. usually when we go through our regular Torah study, we can bring the prophets in to understand.
That's what I'd like to see more of, as we go
Understand
through the
that.
Torah. We bring a little bit more of the prophets in.
So-
as well
Like
as-
if you're doing, like basically you're saying, say he's doing, starting in Genesis, if we can put some prophet in
Yeah,
with it and
spoke of
tie
the
it
same
in,
thing
speaking
in the
of-
beginning or
Some,
whatever.
some of the things that I've tried to do is try to teach, try to run the line all the way through
Yeah.
the
Right,
beginning, the middle, and the end.
Right, but if we can bring a little more in the middle in.
Okay, so, yeah, I'll bring a little bit more in the middle then.
Like Lauren's question about Matthew, will we see him coming in the clouds?
Oh,
Can we get a
And you
Three
did a
lessons-
good
three
study on
Three,
that.
three lessons on.
I mean, that was a
and
good study.
Those,
That was a
those
good study.
those kind of questions help. They help me to come up with things that to teach that are questions that come from you. I could teach Torah until I was green in the face and be perfectly content, but I need to know back from everybody. I want to know about this, or I want to know about that, and postulate those questions.
I do have a
Still in
question.
His word.
I do have a question.
Okay.
When I was growing up, even on like going to church on Sunday and we're going to the Bible and the pastor stands up and he tells you, okay, the lesson's coming from the day, turn to this book. What my question is why are some of the books never mentioned, never taught them? Like Obadiah and Zephaniah and I mean, are they not important? Nehemiah, are they not?
The thing,
Nahum or
They're
Nahum.
not exciting.
I think that the thing that people are trying to,
Okay, are they not important though?
they're all important. Everything has its particular message. Everything has a particular something that it adds into the flavor of the overall scriptures. And everything has its own particular lesson that we can take with us in our everyday life. There are some things that
Why do
some preachers won't teach on because their congregations find them either they consider it to be too boring or they just don't think that it's relevant for today.
Okay, so I've read a little bit through, and they may be a little boring, but there's messages there,
Yeah.
right? I mean, you can go home and read it,
Of
but
course.
you don't see people teaching on it. So is it not?
Yeah, nothing's more boring than numbers, but it's also very important.
But
Right.
we've-
I mean, I guess what I'm trying
Yeah.
to say is the subject matters. Are they not?
It depends on which
Well,
one it is too.
Consider this verse out of Obadiah. The pride of your heart has deceived you, dwelling in the clefts of the rock. This dwelling is lofty, saying in his heart, who shall bring me down to the ground? I mean, that's an incredibly important teaching. It's teaching about pride and how pride separates us from Elohim. And we've taught about separation a number of times. When we went through our genealogies, one of the names that we talked about meant separation. So in Obadiah, it's just one of those things that there's so many prophets and there's so many verses that I guess yield their fruit for a particular lesson. Sometimes you don't think about, well, here's something in Obadiah that we could use as well. Why don't we do a study on Song of Songs, Song of Solomon? Most pastors, preachers, teachers, whatever you want to call them, stay away from it because they consider it obscene.
Mm-hmm.
But yet, in the words and the nuances throughout that, we see our relationship with Elohim as it progresses to a point of being in Eden. Even the words and the subtleties of the erotic parts in that break down into meanings in Hebrew that go beyond simply what they say to us in English. But yeah, you're absolutely, why do we not
Well,
look
And
I
then
just
there's
never-
Ezekiel, which is, you don't even find commentaries on Ezekiel very much. I think it's because it's so hard to understand.
Maybe
It's so,
that's it.
it's very
Ezekiel-
difficult.
Because I
No,
was
and
noticing in the commentaries, a
there's
lot
hard
of
stuff
books
in
are
there.
in there.
I went
And then it
through
comes
the
back to
book of
beautiful
Ezekiel
stuff, too.
last month, and there's a lot of stuff in Ezekiel to teach, and it's confusing if you try to read it in English, and it really is. It's confusing if you don't understand the principles in Bereshis to understand Ezekiel, because everybody wants to turn Ezekiel, Daniel, Jeremiah, they want to turn these prophets into crystal balls.
Yes.
They want to, these are the end time prophets.
But there's more to it.
But there's so much, the end times, the whole end times idea, the whole prophecy idea originated around the 14th century after the massacre of St. Bartholomew, where the Catholics basically in France turned on the Protestants, and by the time the whole thing was over, there was, some say, between 10,000 and 100,000 people dead throughout all of France because of this. And the blame for it was put hot and heavy on the Catholic Church. And it was, it started with the Jesuits, that they actually started writing scriptures that made everything that the prophets were talking about a futuristic idea. So all this now is an end time scenario, and this is going to happen in the end times. The whole of the Bible, the whole of Scripture, isn't about end times. That is a doctrine in and of itself. Remember, we talked about the helical nature of time in Torah. The Torah scriptures in general are for our use every day throughout our lives. It's not just pointing to an end time. The trials, the tribulations, the all this heavy duty stuff that it's talking about, talks about how to get us through our trials and tribulations. But because of this, and because the Pope commanded that something be done to take the pressure off the church, we now have the Bible as a crystal ball to tell us all kinds of stuff. And what we have to try to do is get away from that and get it back into looking at the whole of Scripture, not just the first 5 books, but the whole of Scripture as Torah, as instruction. Yeah.
Mhm.
But yeah,
I think you were also in that question, there's another pragmatic side of it too. Why certain books and things aren't traditional out there in the churches is they don't necessarily tie into the typical subjects. If you start tracking a typical preaching minister's teachings in the average church, they follow the cycles, the giving, tithing, commitment cycle,
Mhm.
Right.
the evangelism, the
Yeah.
seasonal times,
yeah.
Mother's Day, and whatever,
Right,
and
right.
time for people to volunteer when they're rounding up Sunday school teachers in the summer, and the volunteer times.
Yeah, right.
And you'll find that they pick certain subjectional scriptures that back up whatever they're working on. So the process of running an organization, and it's necessary for them. We could easily be judgmental of it, but it's necessary because they end up being that role, a congregational leader and attempting to be a teacher, preacher,
Yes.
whatever,
We have the luxury of not having to do that.
Right.
I try to approach teaching. I guess it's kind of a weird way to look at it from a doctor's point of view. That find things that are relevant to your spiritual health and your spiritual growth, and then I try to stay along the lines of a topic throughout a year to reinforce that topic, and then at the end of the year start on a new one and build that. It's time consuming, but I think that by the end of the period of time, you've got enough of a basis to where you remember a great deal of it, and you can apply a great deal of it. So it's difficult to just say, well, we're going to teach out of the book of Ezekiel or the book of Obadiah, or we're going to teach out of this prophet today. Or might say, we're going to look at some scriptures in Ezekiel, but we're going to tie in scriptures from everybody else to build something out of that so that we understand it as a whole. Then, then we've got it from the beginning, the middle, and the end.
If we're adding them in as we're doing the Torah portion, because I know, growing up in church, I thought that Genesis ran chronically all the way to Revelations.
Oh, yeah.
And then you get into really studying the scripture and you find out that, oh no, these guys here, the prophets, were up here in the beginning as well, so.
Well, you find things in Revelation that are mentioned in Revelation that you can't understand unless you understand what's being spoken of in Bereshit. And Revelation isn't even chronological.
Right.
So, and people try to look at Revelation as this happens and this happens and this happens, and and this is where you get all this mid-trib, post-trib, pre-trib, rapture stuff that starts to come out because of what they read into the book of Revelation, instead of looking at the book of Revelation as a series of different, basically a series of different injections of penicillin to help us get rid of various diseases that we might be developing in the body, so to speak.
Well, certainly one that you've been addressing some, but I think it's excellent when I talked about some of the beliefs and the doctrines that have been around traditionally, but and you have addressed some things through the years about concepts of heaven, and some even recently about hell. I think one that's useful and pragmatic is one that I hear lots of stuff about, and that's angels. I would like to look at that.
Yeah.
True scriptural basis, what, because,
And that's a good.
There's so much lore and assumption and innuendo. It's, kind of angels and Easter bunnies are almost together,
Right.
I asked you the other day, I asked him about that, because people have told me, we have angels walking around the earth, and I'm like, I don't see how that, and I asked about it, and we were fixing to get out somewhere, so we didn't get to touch on it, but.
Yeah. Well, actually, somebody asked me in a Saturday class, after we taught the balance of the lesson on Lorraine's question, then if people don't go to heaven, then how do I explain the 24 elders around the throne?
Yes.
Because Christianity has taught us that the 24 elders around the throne represent the 12 tribes of Israel and the 12 apostles, and it represents a connection of all the peoples from Israel and all the peoples from this. And we talk about, can you really even use the word angels? Angels is a word that actually comes from Greek mythology, from a deity itself, a deity of the sun. To say the word angel is to actually pay homage to a sun deity. The word malachim actually means a messenger, and this is a very specific thing that malachim and malacha in Aramaic both mean the same thing. Someone who carries on a specific message or a mission for Elohim. And we have various groupings of messengers. We have in Revelation, they're called the four beasts that stand before the throne. when we've seen these four beasts that stand before the throne